Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Rewilded Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Lydia Joy. The snow is finally disappearing here on the East Coast. I was able to get into the garden this week. I planted some elderberry starts. I even pulled some carrots out of my garden. I'd been so curious to see if they would be still doing their thing while the snow was there. And I also had some spinach underneath the snow that I was able to grab a few leaves of and munch on. I am feeling the call towards spring, even in the midst of bleak February. I'm sure many of you are as well. We are now in Pisces season. And if you've been here with me following the series I've been laying down in 2026, you know I've been building seasonally, even astrologically. We've gone through some major transits. We just came out of Aquarius season. We talked about dismantling kind of this like false certainty. I went into the shadow of wellness culture. Um, right. Just talking about the ability to see through some of the things that were not so helpful. Um, Thinking about more discernment, right? And now here we are in Pisces season. And I feel like Pisces season is an opportunity to restore some of our responsiveness. This is a season of fluid systems, of permeability, repair, even dream states, and potentially immune recalibration. It's like what could happen when the pressure lifts and your body finally has permission to reorganize. I talked about how we crossed that threshold where Saturn and Neptune moved into Aries, which means now our agency needs a spine, right? Like our intuition needs some structure. But before I can talk about building structure, I want to talk about what's been happening in the dissolution phase. So we can understand why so many people feel kind of like porous right now. They feel reactive, overwhelmed, um, kind of like they're absorbing everything around them. um, and here's the thing. We've had kind of like these poor collective boundaries for quite some time. And I had talked about that shadow side of Neptune and Pisces where it was like this porous, endless, no bottom, no edges, right? Like deep diving in the ocean, so to speak. Some level of like spiritual bypassing, masquerading as like empathy or compassion, and all kinds of merging without discernment. And I think a lot of people are walking around with bodies that reflect that. And today I want to talk about boundaries in the body, not just this emotional, relational stuff. That is very connected. I want to talk about the biological mechanisms that create containment, timing, and resource availability. And so, of course, I have to talk about the gut lining, your mucosa, which is also your immune tolerance. And it can reflect your histamine load. We can talk about all kinds of cool stuff. Your minerals as like signal clarity, your microbes as kind of like your inner ecosystem intelligence, your bowel motility, your motility, your drainage. This is like the movement of what must move within us, right? So I want to do this through a rewilding lens where the focus is restoration, not war, and stewardship. Okay. Stewardship. Get familiar with that word. So I also want to point out, I did a podcast episode on leaky gut, metabolic endotoxemia, and intestinal permeability. Those are all the terms like that we can call this. That episode was in 2024. It's my most listened to episode. Okay, so you can go back and listen to that. That'll dig into what this is if you want to understand better. So look for the link in the show notes. I spelled out the mechanisms there. I'm not going to go back over that today. I want to expound on it. And I want to help people see themselves in that while we're in Pisces season, because this is like a opportunity to do some repair. Now, before I dive in, if this podcast supports you or grounds you or helps you understand your body in a way that you haven't before, you can now support the show directly. There's a link in the show notes for you. My work is listener supported, and your support helps me keep creating the long form, nuanced conversations like this one. So please feel free to check that out and support the show. Thank you. All right. Now I want to dig in. Bear with me. There's some good stuff we have to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is like the terrain. Okay. That's a word you're going to hear me say a lot this year as well. Why so many people feel kind of like this. I'm going to use the word porous right now. I've been working in functional nutrition since 2012. And back then, leaky gut was just starting to become a thing we understood. And it was like the thing we were all talking about back then. And so intestinal permeability was emerging in the research. And we were just beginning to really start to deal with this, like, and understand more of like how big of a deal the gut barrier actually is. Now, 14 years later, we have this like epidemic of people walking around with compromised guts, their barriers, and they don't even know it. All right. Because maybe they don't have digestive symptoms, or at least noticeable digestive related things, but they've got like anxiety and brain fog and skin issues and chronic fatigue and certain autoimmune flares, if you will. Histamine intolerance. I'm going to air quote intolerance. Histamine is like a huge thing. And the biggest one is like this inability to genuinely recover from stress. And typically it's compounded stress, right? And people are just feeling like they're just absorbing everything energetically, emotionally, physically. And a lot of times where I feel like people think it's just them. They think, oh, I'm too sensitive, or, something's wrong with the way that I'm wired, or they're just confused at why they feel this way. And here's what I've learned after 14 years of working with people's inner terrain. Your gut and psychology are deeply connected. I mean, we know this intellectually. Maybe you remember the book Gut and Psychology Syndrome. But the way that you make decisions, the way that you respond to stress, the way that you do or don't hold boundaries, if you will, for yourself, all of it is shaped by the state of your inner ecosystem. So when your gut lining is permeable, when your microbiome is dysbiotic, in dysbiosis, right? Or your immune system is then therefore in this like chronic activation, none of that is separate from your psychology. It is your psychology expressing itself through your body. So what if the reason, boundaries feel impossible to hold isn't because you're weak or you're overly sensitive? What if it's because your gut lining is literally, too permeable to contain what needs to stay in and keep out what needs to stay out? And, that permeability, if you will, that lack of biological containment is showing up in all the layers of your life, right? In your nervous system, your decision making, your relationships, in your capacity to hold your center when everything around you is asking for your attention. So I want to ground this for you. Your gut lining, the mucosal barrier that lines your entire digestive tract, is one of the most important boundaries in the human body. It's a single layer of cells. It's held together by tight junctions. It's one cell thick. That's it. And that's all that stands between the inside of your gut, which is technically outside of your body and your bloodstream. So when that barrier becomes permeable, when those tight junctions loosen, things that shouldn't enter your bloodstream do. We have all kinds of things: undigested food particles, bacterial fragments, lipopolysaccharides, or the short term is LPS, from the gram-negative bacteria that are in your gut, toxins, inflammatory compounds, right? And your immune system sees these things as threats. So it activates, it responds, right? And if this is happening chronically, right, your gut lining stays open, permeable, like, day after day, meal after meal, your immune system never gets to truly stand down. And you can end up having like this state of chronic low grade inflammation, which we can call it metabolic endotoxemia. And your body interprets like everything as a potential threat, right? And that's not genuinely like just like, oh, I have anxiety, right? That's literally your immune system on high alert because your inner boundaries have been breached. So here's where this gets really interesting, because when your gut lining is permeable, it's not just your digestion that's effective. It's your entire system, your entire nervous system. Your gut and your brain, they're in constant communication via the vagus nerve, and your gut is producing neurotransmitters, serotonin, dopamine, GABA. It's also producing metabolites that directly influence your mood, your cognition, your stress response. Okay, so when your gut barrier is compromised, when you have, I'm going to say the word dysbiosis, but don't worry, I'm going to explain this over time. Um, your microbes are producing inflammatory compounds instead of supportive ones. Not all of them, but some of them. And so what happens is your nervous system kind of loses some of its ability to discern real threat from perceived threat. So everything feels threatening. And that's why people feel porous, because they're absorbing, or they feel like they're absorbing other people's emotions, right? They're just really responding to it in a more volatile way because there's instability in their system, right? So it's harder to hold your own center and regulate, if you will. I'm kind of getting sick of that term, but you get the point, right? And so maybe we've been calling this like poor boundaries, or maybe we say I'm an empath, being too empathetic, or highly sensitive individuals, right? Like that term gets thrown around a lot. It's not that those things aren't potentially an aspect of who we are. It's just we now are defining ourselves as that and using that as some kind of like, I don't know, label to explain what we're feeling, right? But it is biological, right? It's your mucosa, your microbiome, and your immune system stuck in a threat response because the most fundamental boundary in your body is constantly being breached. So I want to translate this into the mechanisms, okay? This next section that I'm going to walk us through is a little dense. I want to walk through the biological mechanisms of boundaries, the gut lining, immune tolerance, histamine, minerals, microbes, motility. Stay with me, it's important. If you need this chunk down more slowly, just know that I've been writing a blog series where I'm chunking things down. So you'll want to definitely go check out the blogs I'll be writing over time as well. All right, so let's get into the mechanisms. This is biology, not like woo-woo stuff, right? So the gut lining, your intestinal epithelium, the mucosal barrier, this is like your first line of defense. It's where your body decides what gets absorbed and what gets eliminated. So we have these tight junctions. They're kind of like gatekeepers. And when they're functioning properly, they are selective. Okay. Nutrients pass through, toxins, pathogens, undigested proteins stay out. But when those tight junctions become loose, when the barrier becomes permeable, that selectivity is lost. Now, what causes this? So many things. Let's start with chronic stress. Chronic stress, those hormones constantly circulating through the body, right? Inflammatory foods. You know, if your microbiome is already in disarray, right, which can happen very early in life, that's going to be a cause. Medications, obviously, but more so like the chronic use of certain things, perhaps like NSAIDs or PPIs. We don't have any long-term studies on medications being safe for the microbiome, which to me is like kind of an obvious thing, but just going to throw that out there. Then obviously alcohol, then we can say, and all these chemicals like industrial chemicals, fertilizers, glyphosate, a lack of fiber in the modern diet. Yes, fiber is what feeds our microbes. We cannot avoid it. Of course, there's the overuse of antibiotics, right? The highly processed food era we've all been a part of. Um, Again, then the environmental buildings, the modern buildings and the exposures to mold and mycotoxins, the chemicals that the materials, the houses are built in, right? Chronic infections, basically the modern environment, you guys. Right? Okay, the modern world terrain. And what's happened is that we've been asked to adapt to conditions that systematically compromise this barrier within us. And most people have no idea that that's happening. They don't, first of all, we don't talk about it and we don't understand our physiology, but they're not getting like classic gut symptoms, right? And that's where it gets tricky. Now, I think, immune tolerance can be this intelligent discernment, right? Because our immune system lives largely in our gut. We've been told, 70 to 80% of our immune tissue is in our GALT, gut associated lymphoid tissue, right? And our immune system's job is discernment. Like, what is self? What is other? What is threat? What's benign? So, when your gut lining is intact, and your microbiome is diverse, meaning it has like plenty of species, uh, enough of the right ones, right? Your immune system can practice tolerance. It can recognize beneficial microbes, food proteins, environmental exposures. But when the lining is permeable and your microbiome is dysbiotic, your immune system loses its ability to discern. Everything starts looking like a threat, right? People are developing food sensitivities galore, environmental sensitivities galore, chemical sensitivities. Your histamine threshold drops. You start reacting to everything. This is not you being difficult. This is your immune system trying to protect a compromised boundary. Now we have histamine. It's like our alarm system. I want to talk about it for a second because histamine is exploding right now. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's aware of it more so than ever that I've been in this work. But histamine is a part of your immune response. It's a signaling molecule. It's supposed to help you respond to threats. It dilates blood vessels. It increases permeability temporarily to allow immune cells to move where they need to go. But histamine is supposed to be regulated, right? Your body produces it, uses it, then breaks it down with enzymes like diamine oxidase. And so when your gut lining is permeable, when you have dysbiosis, your microbiome's producing excess histamine, and maybe you're not producing enough DAO to break it down. The histamine accumulates and you become reactive to food, your environment, to stress, even to other people's energy. I told you guys my story about that one a while ago. Anyways, basically, you just feel like you're allergic to life. And again, this gets labeled as like highly sensitive individual, or I'm just too empathetic, or I'm an empath, right? But really, physiologically, it's kind of like this histamine overload in a system that's just lost its ability to regulate inflammatory mediators because the gut barrier is compromised. So now I want to get into minerals as kind of like a signal clarity and containment. Minerals are a big deal, you guys, as you know. They're foundation of like enzymatic function. They are cofactors for thousands of reactions in your body. And they help to regulate the nerve signaling, your muscle contraction, your cellular membrane integrity, the pH balance in your body, your hydration status, right? We could go on and on. So, when your gut lining is permeable and your microbiome has that dysbiosis going on, mineral absorption is impaired. So, you're not assimilating what you consume properly or effectively, right? And so then certain dysbiotic bacteria actually compete for minerals like iron, zinc, manganese. So, you end up a bit depleted in those things, even if you're eating well, even if you're supplementing. So, when you have any level of mineral depletion, if you will, just for simplification here, your nervous system loses clarity. Your cell membranes are going to lose some integrity. Your ability to hold a charge and keep it literally electrically diminishes. So this is where we lose what I'm saying is containment, right? Magnesium, we love our magnesium. It helps to regulate the HPA axis. It supports GABA production. It helps maintain cellular membrane stability. So when you're low in magnesium, for example, your nervous system is much more hyperexcitable. It's harder to calm down and be steady and hold boundaries, right? We know that zinc is critical for our gut barrier integrity, for our immune function, for neurotransmitter regulation. So when we're not able to have good reserves of zinc, we can have that permeable gut, poor immune tolerance, mood dysregulation, right? And then, of course, copper and zinc need to be in balance, right? We know if we have too much copper relative to zinc, we're going to have anxiety, racing thoughts, emotional volatility. Then, of course, we have sodium and potassium. They regulate our fluid balance, our nerve transmissions, our cellular energy. And so when these guys are off, you feel depleted, foggy, unable to respond. Then, of course, we have calcium and magnesium. They have a polarity with each other, right? We need them in a good balance. Too much calcium relative to magnesium. We have this tension, rigidity, inability to let go, right? These are just some examples, okay? And this is why I love HTMA, hair tissue mineral analysis, because it shows the pattern you are in, not just deficiencies, not just like, oh, I'm depleted, right? Like kind of like ratios, relationships, compensations, how your body has been allocating resources over time. And so minerals create the electrical and structural foundation for boundaries at the cell level. Now we get into microbes. They're this wonderful ecosystem intelligence your gut ecosystem, I'm calling it. And this is not just about like good bacteria versus bad bacteria. That's way too reductive. That's like pharmaceutical thinking applied to ecology. Your microbiome is supposed to be an ecosystem, okay? It has keystone species that hold the whole thing together. It is supposed to have diversity. The more diverse, the more resilient, right? There is a lot of functional capacity coming from our microbiome when it is resilient, right? We have the ability to produce short chain fatty acids, regulate our immune function, synthesize our vitamins, break down toxins, modulate neurotransmitters. Okay. So when your microbiome is diverse and balanced, it supports your gut barrier integrity. We've got beneficial bacteria like Akkermansia muciniphila. It actually strengthens the mucosal layer. We've got some butyrate producers, like Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. They that feeds the colonocytes and helps maintain those tight junctions. So when your microbiome is dysbiotic, meaning it can have low diversity of these keystone species that are imperative for our function, that then allows opportunistic organisms to get out of control, that compromises our barrier. And certain bacteria produce enzymes that degrade that mucus layer. Others actually produce inflammatory metabolites like the LPS I talked about. So basically, I could say endotoxin, right? You have a toxin recycling in your system. Things like too much hydrogen sulfide, way too much ammonia, p-cresol, right? When these things are in excess, they become neurotoxic. They basically travel up the vagus nerve and affect your brain directly. So, your microbiome is either supporting your boundaries or degrading them. There's no neutral. And here's the kicker: we have to remember this all day, every day. Okay. Your microbiome is shaped by your environment, right? I keep talking about the modern built environment. We've got indoor living, all the sanitized surfaces, lack of soil contact, right? All this processed food, all these chemicals in our homes, chronic stress, right? Everyone's been on at least a handful, if not more, of antibiotics. We've got disrupted circadian rhythms because we're not honoring our circadian biology and light, right? And all of that systematically reduces our microbiome, like our microbial diversity. Okay. Okay. Because we've all been divorced from nature within living memory, right? Like your grandparents, even. And our microbiomes are paying the price. So now I want to talk about motility and drainage as this movement I was talking about earlier. Um, because boundaries aren't just about keeping things out, they're about moving things through. Okay. So your gut needs to move. Peristalsis, right? This is the rhythmic contractions that move food through your digestive tract, and it is regulated by your enteric nervous system. So your microbiome, your mineral status also play a role. So when that is sluggish, when motility is slow, things in your system stagnate, right? You've seen this in like a body of water. Like like I walk by the creek and like a whole bunch of stuff falls into the creek, like trees and then trash. And then you see that sluggish, stagnant spot, right? Like you guys know what I'm talking about. Imagine that in your body, right? So then what can happen when that motility is slow and things are stagnating is bacteria can overgrow in the small intestine. The biggest one is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, right? So then toxins accumulate. And then unfortunately, the gut lining becomes more permeable because it's under this constant pressure. Now, when motility is too fast, which is rarer these days, but it happens, you don't absorb nutrients properly. You get diarrhea, malabsorption, depletion. Now, your lymphatic system needs to move, right? Because it helps you drain all this like metabolic waste, right? The inflammatory things that are going on in your gut. And um it doesn't have like a pump, right? It moves through muscle contraction, breathing, movement. So when your lymph is stagnant, waste accumulates, inflammation builds, and then what happens? Your immune system gets overwhelmed. So, boundaries require movement, containment requires flow, right? So, we need this beautiful balance of yin and yang, right? Masculine, feminine, like inside of our bodies. And, a lot of people know drainage is like important in this healing work that we do. We've talked about it. It's been going on in the health circles, like drainage, 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 right? Because you can't just like seal that lining, right? You've got to address what needs to move out. So you can't really like restore the barrier without supporting that motility and that lymphatic drainage and those pathways, like being able to do what they need to do to clear you out. So now you understand the mechanisms, right? Excuse me. I want to get into this, my rewilding lens here, because this is about restoration over kind of like war, waging war, right? Because that's kind of what we've done in the health space is like waged war on the things we don't want in our bodies, right? So now hopefully you're starting to see how permeability, immune dysregulation, histamine overload, mineral depletion, microbial dysbiosis, and stagnant drainage all create this like felt sense of porousness, of like not being able to hold boundaries, be decisive, right? Like, so what do we do about it? Right? Obviously, we're not going to go to war. That's not what we're doing. We're not going to kill the bad stuff, constantly suppress histamine, you know, keep taking Zyrtec or whatever, right? We're not going to just like plug up the leaky gut with some supplements or whatever, or restrict all the foods. Good Lord. Or even detox aggressively. Sometimes there is a place for those things in certain cases, specific contexts, but really it has to be short term. And it has to be understood that that is not the actual repair. It's not a strategy. It actually fails because you can't restore an ecosystem by going to war with it. Okay. You can't heal the permeability by adding more pressure. And you can't rebuild boundaries by forcing some kind of compliance to whatever we think we're supposed to do to like fix it, right? Okay, so rewilding is about restoration. It's about creating the conditions where the beneficial organisms can actually thrive again, right? And the ecosystem can reorganize toward balance. So it's about stewarding. We're not killing all the time. We are stewarding. All right. And this is the foundation where we bring in the right minerals, the hydration, to allow the nervous system to properly, not erratically fire, right? That's feels more regulated in the body, right? Circadian rhythm. Everyone's talking about that, right? We've all figured out we need to like avoid certain environmental exposures. Because when the terrain is in a more depleted state or has these toxins or toxic byproducts and there's this constant stress going on, nothing you add on top is going to hold, right? So this is why I love the HTMA, because it shows us kind of like that terrain of how your body has been allocating resources and where the compensations are and what the nervous system's even doing. Like, what stage of stress is your body really in? And addressing minerals first creates that substrate, right? Like to support the function of your cells and restore this like signal clarity, right? Um, you know, you can't just like seed a forest, if you will, in a parking lot. Do you get what I'm saying? It's that modern environmental place we are in, right? If we want to be thriving within ourselves, it's like we're doing it from this wrong lens, if you understand what I'm saying. So, looking at the microbiome helps us understand our personal inner ecosystem even better, not with just like a PCR test that focuses heavily on like pathogens, but with the Biome Effects is what I use. It's a metagenomic test and it shows us the functional ecology. It shows us like what keystone species are there or missing, right? Because that shows us, hey, we're missing some function here, right? Um, what are the functional pathways? We've got saccharolytic fermentation and proteolytic fermentation, and they can go sideways and then have certain metabolites that are being produced that are now toxic to us because they've swung out of control, right? So it's not a pathogen hunt. It's looking at the whole system and the relationships and the capacity so we can ask the honest question of like, all right, well, what does this ecosystem need to reorganize, right? It needs several factors. It definitely needs fiber diversity, and prebiotics to feed beneficial species. But if they're not there, we have to be careful of how we approach this, because it could be uncomfortable, right? Excuse me. And, when we can get some of the pressure to lift little by little by little, the body can actually repair. Of course, we want to support the gut lining, but not by like sealing it with supplements. That's more of a band-aid thinking, right? But we want to remove the irritants. We want to support mucus production, feed those colonocytes, help the body to make the butyrate, right? Like reduce inflammatory load. There's a lot of things that we've been told to do that are only a piece of the puzzle, right? A lot of people throwing certain things at themselves for years, but they're only doing one piece, right? Because the reality is the barrier heals when the conditions support healing. So we need to cover all these layers. And so the way that we can calm our immune response is not by like suppressing it. It's by restoring tolerance in the first place, right? We can reduce that antigen load, the things that are triggering the immune system, by, addressing what's going on in the gut. Okay. Obviously, there's all kinds of, nutrients and things that we've been told support pieces and parts, right? But I find that many people are just like piecemealing this, right? And they don't understand how to look at this whole picture and layer in enough support to cover more bases than just one little piece, right? Otherwise, we're just scaffolding ourselves all the time. Does that make sense? We have the vagus nerve, um, as well, and that's playing a big role in how the immune system directly is influenced by the nervous system, right? So, listen, when we're in that chronic fight or flight, the immune system is going to stay activated. So again, it's all about helping the body to access more of that parasympathetic side of our nervous system so that we can actually get into rest and digest, and then the immune system can recalibrate. Supporting motility is a big deal. Everyone may have a different need in this department. Excuse me, a different um, place they're in around motility. Depends on what's going on in the gut. Obviously, I love my bitters. That's a good one. Obviously, we need hydration and minerals, movement, figuring out how to support the vagus nerve in the moment, right? While we do the inner repair so that it can not be constantly agitated. Obviously lymph support is huge. Like movement is the biggest thing, right? Like moving the body. And supporting the body so that the liver pathways can actually flow, right? We've kind of gotten into this place where we do these like aggressive things where like, I want to support my liver. I want to do this direct thing to activate it to work. But a lot of times in a slowed down system, in a slowed down motility, like lower voltage pattern, you do that too much too fast. You don't give the liver the nutrients it needs and time and space and rest, you know, forcing it forward when the body's not ready can really exacerbate things and make you uncomfortable. So we have to kind of rethink how we're approaching a lot of things, right? Because we want to create flow and we don't want to force the body. We want to widen nourishment, right? Widen it. A lot of times what has gone on is people with compromised gut barriers, they've done like restriction, right? Restricting foods. Um, and that restriction eventually sucks out some joy too. It creates a version of like scarcity. And honestly, you guys, that creates way more stress, which perpetuates the permeability. So I feel that it's really important to widen the window of what the body can tolerate, right? Be able to add more foods, keep more foods on the table, add help the bacteria diversify, right? Like add more versus restrict more. Sorry, guys, clear my throat a lot today. Right. So healing really requires resource availability. You just cannot repair on empty. And here we are. We're in Pisces season. Pisces actually rules a number of things in the body. It rules your feet, your literal ground, your lymphatic system, which is your fluid movement, your immune system, which also includes discernment of self and others, your pineal gland, which affects the circadian rhythm, uh, melatonin, dreaming. That's another piece, right? So this is the season we're in where if the pressure lifts, if we can get to the place where we can lift some pressure within ourselves, the body is just going to try to reorganize, right? Now, the other thing about Pisces season is it's the end of winter. It's the last season of winter. We're going to transition into spring soon. And you might feel more tired. And when you're tired, your body can actually, and you actually do listen to that and rest, your body can repair, right? Because your nervous system can be allowed to drop into parasympathetic. So if you feel tired this Pisces season, don't fight it. Another thing that can happen is like maybe people are going to have some immune flares here and there. It could be recalibration, right? It could be your body trying to process what it couldn't process when it's in survival mode, right? When you're getting into rest and repair mode, you might feel some things showing up. Okay. Um, I want to go into, you might even have vivid dreams. And I will say this, like I have had clients tell me they start having more vivid dreams when they start to drop into parasympathetic. And that is telling. That's like integration. Your subconscious is like trying to work through what your conscious mind couldn't hold. That's a good thing. We want those vivid dreams. You might feel a little more sensitive. That is Pisces. But guys, it's also your body showing you where your boundaries need attention. So it's not a time to push, it's a time to listen. And now that I talked about Saturn and Neptune entering Aries in the last episodes, and I talked about agency. So if you haven't checked those out, definitely do. Our agency needs a spine, right? We have a spine in our body for a reason. It's a structure. It holds us up, right? Our intuition does too. So you can't really build structure on a foundation that hasn't been allowed to repair. You can't take clean action from a nervous system that's still in chronic threat response. And you can't mobilize effectively if your boundaries are still permeable. So here we are, we're in Pisces season. Pisces wants to restore that responsiveness because what's the next season? Aries. It's going to ask us to respond and take action and go, right? And we have this overarching theme of Saturn and Neptune in Aries already telling us that right now. So this Pisces season could be really awesome to restore some things within yourself. I'm just curious. I'm going to ask a few questions so we can see ourselves in this. Do you feel like you absorb everything around you? Do you struggle to say no? Not just emotionally, but like your body physically can't hold the boundary. Do you have kind of like unexplained brain fog or anxiety or fatigue that doesn't seem to match your lifestyle? Do you react to foods now that you used to tolerate fine before? Do you feel like you're allergic to life? Like you're sensitive to everything, chemicals, scents, environments, people's moods? Maybe do you have skin issues or autoimmune flares or some type of chronic inflammation in your body that you or no one else can really explain? Or maybe you feel like you're doing everything right, eating well, supplementing, resting, and you still feel pretty crappy. I want to say your gut lining is probably permeable and your microbiome is got some version of dysbiosis. You're definitely in some version of mineral. I don't like saying depletion because it feels like we have zero, but like that's not what I mean. I mean, like, you can't hold a charge, right? It takes minerals to create voltage in the body, and a lot of people just aren't holding that charge. So that's kind of what I mean when I say depleted, like a battery that keeps running out, even if you're putting it on the charger. You know what I mean? Your immune system probably is in some version of chronic activation. It's on alert, right? And then even your nervous system is probably interpreting a lot more things as threat than you are genuinely like aware of. Okay. That's biological. It's repairable, but we can't repair it by going to war with our bodies or ignoring it. Right. And you can't just like slap a bunch of supplements in there if you're not doing it strategically, addressing the foundation of you, right? And we certainly cannot restrict our way to healing. We have to get out of that paradigm entirely. It's important to understand each of our own like unique terrain. Like this personalization is so key, so that you can restore and make sensible actions, right? And this is why I do the work that I do, you guys. I've watched the functional health world go from leaky gut back in the 12 years ago version to like the version now where people are taking umpteen supplements trying to patch themselves back together and like miss the entire point. Right? That's why I say this isn't about fixing, it's about stewarding. It's about understanding your body as that ecosystem it's become through everything you've lived, everything you've adapted to, everything you've survived. It's really about seeing the patterns, not just the symptoms, and creating conditions for reorganization, not just trying to force some version of compliance in your body, right? It's really about respecting your body's intelligence. Let your body lead and stop treating it like the enemy. So, as you know, I work with a small number of clients through my minerals and microbes program. It's a 4-month ecosystem restoration journey. We're going to start with hair tissue mineral analysis to see your terrain, basically how your body has been allocating resources and what your stress patterns are and where the depletion is. Then we look at the biome effects to map your gut ecology. We're not pathogen hunting. This is more of like a relational view of what's going on in there. What keystone species do you have? What are missing? What functional capacity your microbiome has? What metabolites are being produced? Like, let's see what's there so we know what we need to do. And so we have 4 guided sessions over 4 months working together to really widen the nourishment, support your capacity, and honestly observe how your body responds, letting your body lead. So with that in mind, I do weekly check-ins with my clients so that we can follow their body, right? Let it kind of tell us the pace. I have a private client portal for more insight, information, resources, yada, yada. Okay, this is not a protocol. This is a collaborative, relational way to work together to respect what's actually happening in your body and your body's timing. Okay. And here's what I want people to understand is like if you're feeling porous right now, if you're struggling to hold boundaries in your life, if you're reactive, you're overwhelmed, you can't quite land in your body, this isn't the time to push harder. Your body's trying to tell you something. Your mucosa is like communicating. And anytime your immune system has any kind of response, it's just feedback, right? It's trying to show you where the conditions need to shift, and we can work with that. Most people really do need support. They need someone who understands the biology, the ecology, the nervous system, the timing, not somebody who's going to give you like a 47-step protocol and send you on your way, right? Someone who can sit beside you, give you guidance, help you see the patterns, understand your adaptive intelligence, and create the conditions for reorganization. That's what I do. That's what minerals and microbes is. So if this is landing, if you are ready for guidance and you want to understand your terrain, if you're like done managing all these symptoms and so overwhelmed by it, and you want to actually restore your ecosystem, you can learn more in the show notes. I have a link below. I do work with a small number of new clients each month so that I can stay present and deeply engaged. So if you're meant to do this work with me, you will know. I trust that. So check that out. See if it's right for you. And I just want to leave you guys all with this. Like, our bodies are not our enemies, right? Like, I know you know that, but like sometimes people feel like, oh my gosh, why is my body reacting, right? So it feels like it's our enemy, but it's really what's going on in there, that there's this permeability, reactivity, sensitivity. These things are not actually failures, right? They're responses, adaptations. Your body is just doing its best to survive in a terrain it was never designed for. And now we're in a season where repair is kind of like the focus, right? Pisces can say, can you soften enough to let the reorganization happen? Can you actually trust your body's intelligence enough to stop forcing it without consent and start listening? Right? Can you actually see your boundaries or lack of as like information instead of like some kind of personal judgment or, right? It's biological that we can become porous. I just explained that to you. And biology can be restored, right? It's just about stewardship, creating the right conditions and the right timing. So here we are. We can let the repair happen by letting our bodies reorganize and, you know, allow that to be something that we don't assign meaning to ourselves, like some kind of label or some kind of shame about what our body is doing, right? All right. Well, I appreciate you guys for being here, for listening in. Thanks for being here. I will definitely see you on the next episode. And please, by all means, go over to my website. I've got some articles there for you as well if you want to kind of like really sit with the understanding of what your biology is doing. All right, guys, all for now. Stay wild, stay well.